Victoria stood in the pouring rain outside the family home, her clothes clinging to her like a second skin, heavy with water that seeped into her bones. Mascara streaked down her face like black tears, mixing with the relentless downpour that blurred her vision. The front door had just slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a gunshot in her chest, reverberating through her ribcage and making her heart stutter. She clutched the crumpled eviction notice in her trembling hand, the paper sodden and the ink blurring into illegible smudges under the assault of the rain. Failure. Her sister's voice rang in her ears from moments ago, spat out with such venom that it still burned like acid on her skin. Victoria's knees buckled beneath her, no longer able to support the weight of her grief, and she sank to the wet pavement, the cold concrete biting into her flesh as sobs racked her body uncontrollably. How had it come to this? The world spun around her in a dizzying whirl, cold and unforgiving, the streetlights casting harsh shadows that danced mockingly in the puddles. Thunder rumbled overhead like a cruel laugh from the heavens, mocking her despair as lightning flashed, illuminating the scene in stark, unforgiving bursts. Inside the house she'd grown up in, the walls that once held laughter and warmth now felt like a prison, bars forged from betrayal and lies. But she couldn't go back, not ever. Not after what they'd done to her, the wounds too deep, the trust shattered beyond repair. Her phone buzzed insistently in her pocket, vibrating against her thigh. A message from an unknown number. "We can help." She ignored it at first, her fingers numb as she wiped her face with a sodden sleeve, the fabric doing little to stem the flow of tears and rain. The rain hammered down without mercy, washing away the remnants of her old life, carrying them into the gutters like discarded trash. But the pain inside her burned hotter than ever, a fire that no storm could extinguish. She sat there for what felt like hours, the water pooling around her, soaking her through until her body shivered violently, forcing her to move. Slowly, she pushed herself up, her legs unsteady, and stumbled away from the house, each step a battle against the storm and her own crumbling resolve. Flashbacks hit her like shards of glass, piercing her mind with sharp, vivid memories that made her wince. Growing up in that suburban home, Victoria had always been the dreamer in the family, the one with wild ideas and a sketchbook perpetually in hand. At 28 now, she still remembered the dinner table arguments with painful clarity, the way her parents' faces would tighten when she talked about her passions. Her mother, with her perfectly coiffed hair and weary eyes, would sigh deeply whenever Victoria mentioned art school, preferring instead the stable career in finance that her sister Elena had chosen. Elena, 2 years older, at 30, was the golden child, the one who excelled effortlessly, top of her class in high school, valedictorian in college, landing a high-paying job at a prestigious investment firm straight out of graduation. "Why can't you be more like her?" her mother would say, her voice laced with exhaustion and a hint of resentment, as if Victoria's choices were a personal affront. Her father, a quiet man with a stern jaw, would nod along, his silence more cutting than any words could be, his disapproval hanging in the air like a thick fog. But the betrayal had started small, festering like a hidden wound that grew infected over time, spreading poison through their family bonds. It began innocently enough, with subtle digs and comparisons that chipped away at Victoria's confidence. When Victoria's startup idea, an innovative online platform for independent artists to showcase and sell their work directly to buyers, bypassing traditional galleries, began gaining traction in her mind, she couldn't contain her excitement. She shared it with her family over a rare, harmonious dinner one evening, the table set with her mother's best china, the aroma of roast chicken filling the air. "It's going to change everything," she'd said, her eyes alight with passion, her hands gesturing animatedly as she described the features. User-friendly interfaces, secure payment systems, community forums for feedback. Elena smiled then, a tight, polite curve of her lips, But it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, which remained cool and calculating. Jealousy simmered there, unspoken but palpable, like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. Their parents, always cautious, fearing that Victoria's risky entrepreneurial path would drain the family's limited resources or lead to financial instability, had long favored Elena's predictable success. Self-preservation, they called it in hushed tones late at night when they thought Victoria was asleep, their whispers carrying through the thin walls. Protecting the family's future by investing in the sure thing, not the gamble. Then came the theft, the moment that shattered everything irreparably. Victoria had poured every last cent of her savings into developing the prototype, sacrificing sleep and social life, working endless nights in her dingy one-bedroom apartment where the fluorescent lights buzz incessantly and the neighbors argue through the walls. She coded by day, designed by night, her fingers flying over the keyboard, her vision blurring from fatigue but fueled by determination. One fateful weekend, during an obligatory family visit to celebrate her father's birthday, she left her laptop at home in her old room, trusting the sanctity of family. When she returned to her apartment, panic set in. Files were missing. Her meticulously crafted business plan, the initial code sketches, the wireframes she'd drawn by hand and scanned, everything gone, vanished like smoke. Days later, at another family gathering, a backyard barbecue with relatives milling about, the smell of grilled burgers wafting, Elena announced her new venture with a flourish, her voice confident and proud, an app that was suspiciously similar, almost identical in concept and features, backed by investors from her prestigious firm. "It's just business," Elena said coolly when Victoria confronted her later in the kitchen, away from prying eyes, her tone dismissive, as if Victoria's accusations were childish tantrums. Their parents sided with Elena without hesitation, their loyalty unwavering. "Elena's established in her field. You were always unreliable, dear," her father muttered, avoiding her gaze, his words slicing deeper than any knife. The lawsuit Victoria desperately tried to file only drained her further, sucking away the last of her resources like a vortex. She hired a budget lawyer, scraping together funds from odd jobs, but the court proceedings were brutal. Her parents testified against her on the stand, their voices steady, but their eyes flickering with guilt they refused to acknowledge, claiming under oath that Victoria had borrowed ideas from Elena during casual conversations, twisting the truth to fit their narrative. Court documents, cold and impersonal, painted Victoria as the jealous younger sibling, the perpetual failure grasping at straws to undermine her successful sister. She lost everything in the process. Her meager savings evaporated in legal fees, her reputation tarnished in industry circles where whispers of her frivolous suit spread like wildfire, and finally her home, when her parents cut her off financially, revoking the small allowance they'd provided as a safety net. The eviction notice was the final blow, served coldly by a process server on a sunny afternoon that mocked her misery. But there was something they didn't know. A secret Victoria had buried deep within her digital archives, the original time-stamped emails she'd sent to herself, proving beyond doubt that the idea was hers from the inception, complete with dates and detailed notes. She hadn't revealed them yet, holding back for reasons even she couldn't fully articulate. Fear of escalating the conflict to irreparable levels, perhaps, or a lingering, foolish hope for reconciliation, a belief that blood ties could still mend. Nights blurred into days in a haze of survival. As Victoria crashed on friends' couches, her world reduced to a weathered backpack stuffed with essentials and the shattered fragments of her dreams. She moved from one temporary haven to another, the smell of unfamiliar laundry detergents clinging to borrowed blankets, the awkward sympathy in her friends' eyes a constant reminder of her fall. Sleep came in fits, haunted by nightmares of betrayal, and mornings brought the harsh reality of job hunts and ramen noodles. The rain that fateful night outside the family home had been a turning point, a cathartic deluge that forced her to confront the depth of her despair. Shivering in the storm, she finally fished out her phone with numb fingers and opened that mysterious message. It was from Alex, a former colleague from art school who'd pivoted successfully into the tech investment world, his profile picture showing a sharp-suited man with kind eyes. "Heard about your app through mutual friends. Sounds like you've been wronged. Let's talk." Intrigued and desperate, she agreed to meet him the next day in a dimly lit cafe downtown, the kind with exposed brick walls and the constant hiss of espresso machines, steam rising from coffee cups like ghosts of past ambitions, carrying the rich aroma of freshly ground beans. Alex listened intently as they sat in a corner booth, the wooden table scarred from years of use, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully as she recounted the betrayal in halting words, her voice unsteady, cracking at the painful parts. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his presence solid and reassuring. "Family can be the worst enemy sometimes," he said with a sigh, his tone laced with empathy born from his own experiences. Beside him sat Mia, a sharp-featured lawyer in her mid-30s with a reputation for dismantling corporate theft cases like a surgeon wielding a scalpel, her notebook open and pen poised. She'd been introduced as Alex's go-to legal expert, her dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. "We can build this back stronger than before," Mia added, her voice steady and confident, cutting through Victoria's doubt like a beam of light. Allies at last, people who believed in her, who saw the potential she'd always known was there. For the first time in months, Victoria felt a spark ignite within her. Not the warm glow of hope, but a calculated fire, a burning resolve to reclaim what was hers. The transformation began quietly, almost imperceptibly at first, building momentum like a snowball rolling downhill. Mornings were spent in Alex's sleek office overlooking the city skyline, the glass walls reflecting the bustling world below, where she learned code refinements she hadn't mastered before, debugging algorithms, optimizing user interfaces, her fingers gaining speed and precision on the keyboard. Alex mentored her patiently, explaining concepts with diagrams on whiteboards, the markers squeaking as he drew flowcharts. Evenings blurred into late nights with Mia in her cluttered law firm conference room, surrounded by stacks of case files and the faint scent of printer ink, poring over legal strategies, dissecting precedents, and crafting ironclad arguments. Victoria's body changed too, adapting to the demands of her new life. Yoga sessions at dawn in a local studio with mirrored walls that reflected her growing strength, the instructor's calm voice guiding her through poses that steadied her mind and centered her emotions. Long runs along the river path at dusk, the pavement pounding beneath her feet, burning off the rage that simmered just below the surface, sweat mingling with the evening mist. Small victories piled up like building blocks, each one a step toward reclamation. First came a freelance gig designing logos for a startup incubator, her signature style, bold lines and vibrant colors, instantly catching eyes online, leading to more commissions that filled her bank account bit by bit. Then, a viral post on social media about stolen dreams in the art world, carefully worded to avoid direct accusations, but hinting enough at her story to stir whispers in industry circles. Shares and likes accumulating like votes of confidence. Comments poured in from fellow artists sharing similar tales, creating a community of support that bolstered her spirits. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Victoria stood in her tiny rented room, a cramped space with peeling wallpaper and a single window overlooking a noisy alley, staring into a cracked mirror that hung crookedly on the wall. The reflection warped her features slightly, a fitting metaphor for the twisted family ties that had brought her here. But in that distorted image, she saw not the broken girl who'd been cast out, but a woman forged in the silence of solitude, her eyes hardened with determination, her posture straight and unyielding. That night, she relaunched her platform under a new name, Echo Art, a nod to the echoes of her original idea that refused to fade. She worked feverishly, uploading features, testing beta versions, her computer screen glowing in the dark room. Users flocked to it almost immediately, drawn by the authentic stories she teased in blog posts, tales of perseverance without naming names, resonating with creators worldwide. Revenue started as a trickle, small sales and subscriptions, then flowed steadily as word spread, partnerships forming with influencers and small galleries. A major breakthrough came with a partnership with a renowned urban gallery in the city center, their curator impressed by Echo Art's user base and innovative tools. The deal was sealed over a lunch meeting, contracts signed amid clinking glasses, marking her first big win. Elena's firm noticed, of course, the similarities too glaring to ignore, and sent a cease and desist letter via courier, the envelope crisp and threatening. But Mia shredded it in court with surgical precision, presenting counter-evidence that dismantled their claims, the judge's gavel banging like a victory drum. But tension built relentlessly, a pressure cooker simmering toward explosion. Anonymous tips began arriving in Victoria's inbox, cryptic messages from industry insiders. Elena was struggling, her app floundering amid growing plagiarism rumors that spread like wildfire on forums and review sites, users abandoning ship for Echo Art's superior platform. Victoria's parents called once, their voices frail and quivering over the phone line, the connection crackling with static. "Come home, Vicky, we miss you," her mother pleaded, using the childhood nickname that twisted like a knife in Victoria's gut. She hung up without a word, her heart pounding like distant thunder, the phone slipping from her hand to clatter on the floor. Yet doubt crept in like shadows at twilight. Was this path of empowerment truly her own, or just a mirrored version of the jealousy that had poisoned her family? Nights became restless, her mind racing with what-ifs, staring at the ceiling as city lights flickered through the blinds. The twist came on a stormy afternoon, the kind where the sky darkened prematurely and rain lashed against the windows of Alex's high-rise office at angry fists. Victoria was signing off on a major investment deal, her pen gliding over the paper, the room filled with the scent of fresh ink and leather chairs, when Mia burst in unannounced, her face pale as parchment, hair disheveled from the wind outside. "We found something big," she said breathlessly, slamming a folder onto the conference table. Spilled blood, pages fluttering, emails from her parents to Elena, dated weeks before the theft, their words cold and calculated. They'd encouraged the sabotage explicitly, fearing that Victoria's burgeoning success would eclipse Elena's steady rise, threatening the comfortable retirement they envisioned, funded entirely by Elena's lucrative salary and bonuses. But the real gut punch, the revelation that knocked the air from Victoria's lungs, a hidden clause in the family trust, buried in legalese, designating Victoria as the primary beneficiary of their grandmother's substantial estate, a fortune in stocks and properties they'd concealed for years to maintain control over her, dangling inheritance like a carrot to steer her path. "They betrayed you for money, pure and simple," Mia whispered, her hand on Victoria's shoulder, the touch grounding amid the chaos. Victoria's world tilted on its axis, the room spinning as nausea rose. Forgiveness? The word tasted like ash in her mouth, bitter and dry. Or revenge, cold and sharp as a blade honed in the dark. That night, she confronted Alex alone in his penthouse, the fire crackling in the massive stone fireplace, casting shadows like dancing demons on the walls, the warmth contrasting the chill in her veins. "Did you know about this?" she asked, her voice low and steady, though her hands trembled. He hesitated, poking the logs with an iron tool, sparks flying.
suspected something like it. Why not tell me sooner? Thought you'd break under the weight. His words hung in the air, loaded with unspoken implications, the fire popping emphatically. She stared into the flames, mesmerized by their hypnotic dance. I won't break. Not anymore. The moral war raged inside her like a tempest, blood ties pulling one way, the call for justice yanking the other. A large mirror across the room reflected her fractured expression, eyes stormy, jaw set. In that moment, she chose, the decision crystallizing like ice. Victoria arrived unannounced, pushing open the unlocked door, her coat dripping water onto the polished hardwood floor that her mother had always kept immaculate. Elena sat rigid on the floral couch, her posture perfect but her face drawn. Parents flanking her like reluctant guards, their expressions a mix of surprise and dread. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, the grandfather clock ticking ominously in the corner, marking seconds like heartbeats. You stole everything from me, Victoria said, her voice a blade honed sharp, cutting through the silence. Elena's eyes flashed with defiance, her lips curling. You were nothing without us. Failure, right? That's what you called me. Victoria tossed the bundle of time-stamped emails onto the coffee table with a flick of her wrist. They scattered like leaves in an autumn wind, pages fluttering to reveal damning evidence. Her mother's face crumpled like tissue paper, tears welling. We did it for the family, to keep us all secure. Fear drove us, her father added, his voice cracking like old leather, hands clasped tightly in his lap. You were always so unpredictable, so full of risks. Victoria stepped closer, her shadow looming long in the lamplight. Jealousy, control, that's the truth. She pulled out the contract from her bag, Elena's firm desperately begging for a merger with EchoArt to save their sinking ship. Sign this, and your jobs are safe for now. Refuse, and I expose every last dirty secret. Elena's hand shook violently as she reached for the pen, her knuckles white. Why are you doing this? Because now your salary comes from my signature. The words landed like punches, each one precise and devastating. Silence descended upon the room, heavy as blood pooling from a wound, thick and suffocating. Victoria watched them break before her eyes, tears streaming down cheeks, averted gazes filled with shame, bodies slumping in defeat. No screams erupted, no dramatic outbursts, just a slow, agonizing unraveling of facades built over years. She turned away slowly, the room blurring in a haze of her own unshed tears and lingering pain, the power she'd wielded tasting bittersweet on her tongue. Outside, back in the rain, she collapsed against the closed door, her breath coming in ragged gasps, the cool droplets mingling with hot tears on her cheeks, washing away the residue of confrontation. In the end, the merging went through seamlessly, papers signed and filed, EchoArt absorbing Elena's failing venture and soaring to new heights under Victoria's leadership, her allies, Alex and Mia, by her side through board meetings and expansion plans. The company grew exponentially, offices expanding, employees hired, media coverage praising her as a rising star in tech and art. But revenge's cost lingered like a shadow, sleepless nights haunted by echoes of that final confrontation, a hollow ache where family bonds once resided, now a void that no success could fully fill. She gained freedom, an empire built meticulously from the ruins of her past, wealth and respect that validated her dreams. Yet the price was etched in her soul, a reminder of what was lost. One quiet evening, months later, alone in her spacious new office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city lights, Victoria sat at her desk, a family photo from happier times propped against a stack of reports. Flames from a scented candle flickered across the glass frame, casting warm glows and dancing shadows that played over the frozen smiles. With a steady hand, she signed a check for their mounting medical bills, discovered through discreet inquiries, made anonymous through a foundation she'd set up. Not forgiveness, she whispered to the empty room, her voice soft but resolute. Just release. The flame guttered out suddenly, leaving only the hush of silence, a profound quiet that enveloped her like a blanket, signaling the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another.